Hello and welcome to episode 443 of Retro Encounter, RPG Fans Weekly Podcast of Many Topics. I'm Mike Sollosi. And listeners, we're doing one of our Spoilercast episodes today, and while that is usually as least retro as we get on Retro Encounter, this game I think is a retro throwback in several ways that speak to me very specifically, and all of that will become very clear very soon. Mike, am I coming in okay? It looks like my waveform is weird. But before we get into it, let's introduce my co-hosts for today. They are Mike Salbato.
Hello, happy to be here.
And Tin Manuel.
Hi.
Tin and Mike, we're here to discuss The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, which, if I'm not mistaken, was a game that was announced earlier this year and then dropped later this year. It dropped in September. So the three of us played through it in September and October and are here recording about it at the end of October for an episode in November. But I was just so excited by a new 2D Zelda happening, and with the gimmick of Zelda being the central protagonist instead of Link, that I knew this was a game I wanted to talk about with people on a podcast, and here we are today. So before we get into the details of the game, I want you to see if you guys can transport yourselves back to when you first heard about this game. Mike, what was your reaction to new 2D Zelda? Zelda is the protagonist, and it looks like the Link's Awakening remake from 2019. If those three things hit you all at once, what do you remember your feelings on the matter?
I remember the journey of my feelings because the trailer opens up the way the actual game opens up, and you see Link very clearly fighting again and based on A Link to the Past. I'm like, oh, like maybe it's a Link to the Past remake or something in that world, and it makes you think for the first couple minutes that it's a new 2D Zelda game starring Link, and I'm like, I'm on board. That looks cool. When Link goes away and Zelda walks out, I'm hard to, I don't know. I didn't have words. I was like, no, are they really doing this finally? After so many years of people asking them, it was really, really exciting.
Yeah, and you brought up something that I wanted to bring up later for sure. The game begins in media res. You are Link in a dungeon. It feels like you're at the middle of the game or like within a dungeon early in the game, but then so it's sort of an action-packed beginning. There's no like slowly waking up to a fairy bothering you and then having to talk to everyone in town before you encounter an enemy. No, this game starts in the middle of the action, and then the big reveal is that Link is the one being captured by a mysterious force, and Zelda needs to do the rescuing. But Tin, same question to you. When you first heard about this game and maybe saw that trailer, what feelings do you remember feeling?
Oh, I was just fangirling because coming from playing Tears of the Kingdom, where Zelda also had a lot of exposure, but we're still not able to play her. It was really such a joy to see that we're finally, able to control her, because I feel like she's able to contribute something this time. So yeah, it was mostly shocking in a way, but at the same time, I was also very grateful that finally Nintendo listened to their fans. So yeah, that's pretty much how I felt when I saw the trailer.
And both of you alluded to this. A game starring Zelda had been not necessarily a demand, but because Nintendo doesn't listen to demands, had been something of a fan favorite outcry. But that had been at least a fan hope for many, many years that they would make a game about Zelda. And like, I think I had told this joke on forums or chat rooms or social media for years. It's like, I want a Zelda game that stars Zelda, and it's called The Legend of Link, Zelda's Adventure or something like that. That was, you would see commentary like that all over the place. But because, Nintendo is sometimes very, very daring and experimental with their games, but mostly sort of sticks to what works. Like they haven't done a Pokemon game starring adults in the main series. They haven't done a Mario game about Princess Peach rescuing the Mario Brothers. Although they actually did flip that a little bit earlier this year, but like people had sort of assumed that a Zelda game starring Zelda wasn't going to happen, but then it happened, and maybe it's safer because it's not one of their big budget major games. Like this isn't a game with the production value of a Tears of the Kingdom or Breath of the Wild, but it is a main series Zelda game starring Zelda, and she rescues Link as part of the main story, and it's really really great. From the get go, like you start in the middle of the action, you get your sort of core abilities in the first 30 minutes or so, and then you're kind of off to the races, and they give you a large amount of player freedom in both how you approach the story and how you can approach every encounter. And should we just get into talking about the Tri-Rod, everybody?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
All right, I don't want to go over every plot point of the game. This is a spoiler cast, so we are allowed to spoil anything. But I don't think listeners necessarily want to hear us talk about every story beat. But you escape from this dungeon, which is called the Southern Ruins. You go make your way back to the castle. Your king and his two advisors, amusingly named General Right and Minister Left, they're amenable. They're listening to you, and they're like, "All right, we need to get to the bottom of this, and see if we can save the hero of Hyrule." But then the mysterious rifts that are appearing all over Hyrule make their way to the throne room. The king and the minister and the general are all swallowed and then immediately replaced by shadow versions of themselves, which are almost literally evil twins. And so the evil twins of these three important characters throw Zelda into the dungeon. I think they either tell you or imply that she is to be executed later.
Oh yeah,
Which is
I was
Yeah.
surprised. They're like
Yeah.
they make no bones about it. It's like, yes, you're going to be executed. I'm like, oh
Right. So I thought, see, I played this like a month ago, so I was making sure I hadn't dreamt that. But I don't remember executions being plot points in other Zelda games,
no.
especially ones that look like dioramas made with dolls. But so you're like, oh no, Zelda's about to be executed. But then this mysterious little fairy-like golden pebble being named Tri visits you and says, "Hey, let's get out of here. You can use my the powers of this Tri-Rod to escape." And that's when we're first introduced to sort of the core gameplay mechanic of Echoes of Wisdom. With this item called a Tri-Rod, you can sort of tap it on any object or a defeated enemy to record it. And once something's been recorded, you can summon it, summon a fake version of it called an echo. And I think the very first things that they have you echo are like rocks, boxes, and the bed in your prison cell. So you can right from the beginning, like to escape your prison cell, you're like, all right, I'm going to summon some beds and stack them like a staircase to get up to the top here. And then you can record a pot, then pick up the pot like any Zelda game and throw it against a wall so it smashes against the wall and distracts the guards so you can leave. And it's one of those things that's just such a simple mechanic that it seems like I'm over explaining it, but really you just put things inside your rod and then you can summon them as much as you want. But the number of copies you can have out at once is limited by what level Tri is at, and you can level up your Tri Rod throughout the game. But once you sort of start recording things and summoning echoes, and like once you defeat a couple enemies by throwing rocks at them, you can almost summon enemies like you're playing like you're playing like a summon class in a Diablo game or something, because it's so different from any other Zelda game, but immediately feels natural and fun. Without getting into real hardcore puzzle solving or boss fighting, what do you guys think of this Tri-Rod nonsense? Because I was pretty excited from the beginning.
When the game was first announced, it looked like what they were going for conceptually, not like one for one, was marrying the visual or the aesthetic of like the Link's Awakening remake, a 2D kind of Zelda, with the creative freedom that we got with the Ultra Hand and stuff in Tears of the Kingdom. Not in the same way, but that really is what they did, just in a different type of way, where you're building contraptions or like summoning monsters. And I just thought it was so creative. Like it brought me back to a similar feeling in Tears of the Kingdom again. It's like, well, there isn't necessarily one right way to approach this. You can do it as long as you can get the thing done. You can do whatever you want, and I think that's just a lot of fun. I mean, especially with how many different tools, echoes, like objects and also enemies they give you. Like, it means you can approach exploration and battles in so many different ways.
Yeah, if you think of like every echo that you can record and summon as a verb, then this game gives you I think a number of verbs to interact with the world in the low hundreds. It's really, really impressive. The only problem is like scrolling through the giant list of them looking for the one that you want that you
Oh
maybe haven't
God.
used in a few hours.
Yeah. That was only my problem as well in the game. Like I love having to gather all the echoes, but you at a certain point you would just be using some certain favorites, and there are times when like your favorites won't work for that puzzle, so you're forced to like scroll over the entire list, which was kind of annoying. I think they should have found a way to make that, I don't know, a lot more seamless, I guess.
I don't know what the right way to do it would be. Like maybe if there was a way of saving a favorite loadout,
Yeah,
or like
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
like picking 4 favorites or something that would always be at the top of your list. Like something like that would have been nice, or a better way to sort them or find them might have been nice. But it's so these are only minor nitpicks. But Mike had the exact right idea. Like this is if Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom were about Zelda giving you huge amounts of freedom, where traditional Zelda is there is a lot of freedom, but generally there is one way to solve every puzzle, one way to defeat every boss. Usually it's about the item that you found in the dungeon you're in, or something around the key gimmick of the game. Like there's usually one solution, or one sort of crucial idea behind every encounter in a classic Zelda game. But in these new ones, they've been more about creative freedom, and I really do think that Echoes of Wisdom is more like a traditional Zelda game than Breath of the Wild or Tears of the Kingdom. But they do give you a taste of that freedom of those two major 3D Zelda games in a fairly unique way. Because I mean, I don't think there's any other Zelda game that lets you summon Zelda monsters or use objects in this way.
Right.
But they it really is a marriage of these concepts, and with the extra excitement of being a game starring Zelda. And I mean, sometimes like they don't totally abandon the Link gameplay. Pretty soon, I think it's at the end of the first dungeon. Actually, you get a way of turning into Link temporarily, so you can fight with a sword and shield and bow like normal.
Yeah.
But they make that like almost like a super move, like something limited that's very strong, but you can't just rely on it entirely. Um, and yeah, but this approach was so fun. Going back into the story a little bit, the first 3 dungeons of the game are those the ruins that Link was in at the very beginning, the southern ruins. But Tri leads you into sort of uh, a rift, sort of help saying, because you're with me, you can survive these rifts instead of being frozen and replaced by a clone. And if we go in here and we find all of my little Tri sprite buddies, we can repair the rifts and free anyone that was trapped inside one. And so you go through this rift, you see like pieces of the world that were swallowed by the rift. You go into the remains of that dungeon, or the dungeon that you were in, which has since been swallowed by the rift. You do the first dungeon of the game, and this saves several of the townspeople in that sort of southern part of the map, and then sets you on a mission to find the dungeons, or I should say the rifts, where General Wright, Minister Left, and King Hyrule are. And that's sort of the first half of the game. There's these one starting dungeon, then you can do the Zora dungeon or the Gerudo dungeon in either order, and then sort of dungeon 4 is like the midpoint. But I mean, this is basically exploring the bottom 2/3 of the map or so, and but you can approach it in any order with a lot of character freedom, and maybe avoiding the second half of the game. Like what's something of this game's first half? It can be a plot point or a dungeon or a puzzle or even a favorite echo that you remember just really really enjoying. I have a couple in mind, but I want to hear from you guys first. Like what's a memorable first half of the game thing that you guys enjoyed encountering?
Trampoline. Uh, that trampoline was my favorite echo for way too long. A large part of the game. It actually became a running joke while Hillary and I were playing, and I just kept saying, "It's like, you know what? The solution to everything is the trampoline." And I was being facetious, but at the same time, a good 70-80% of the time, it did work for what I wanted to do outside of combat encounters. I love that. A small little thing I liked actually at the beginning, just to touch on really quick, and you'll find this all throughout the game. Like there's so many nice little touches. Like there's very obvious throwbacks to some other games, but just that first town when you rescue people and go in there, like that's where Link is from in this world. And I like that you can go into his house and just see like little things in there. There's a little owl statue, and you see his hat like draped in the corner, stuff like that. I really enjoyed like just looking at things and discovering little things like that.
Oh, and that's also where you got your trampoline.
Yes, yes.
I remember I used the trampoline a little bit, but mostly in the first half of the game. I was making a lot of bed staircases, maybe this is a minor thing, but one of my favorite things you could do in this game is whenever there were no monsters around, you can just summon a bed and fall asleep and take a nap in it,
Oh,
and
I
it
So
always
helpful.
did that.
and it heals you. And eventually, much later in the game, when you get to return to the castle and you make an echo of Zelda's own bed, it's because it's her bed and she's most comfortable there. It heals her the most.
Yeah, I think
But
it.
it costs more tries to make it, so you can't like spam Zelda beds. The old bed is very helpful for the beginning half of the game.
Yeah.
I think it's also because of if you're wearing that clothing, that also helps boost it faster on.
Oh, the pajamas.
Yeah, yeah, that one.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, it's also based on the outfit, I think, if I
I, I,
recall
fo-
it
I
correctly.
found the cat outfit, but I didn't find pajamas. Are those a quest reward?
I think it's a side quest. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah,
man, I
yeah,
missed that one.
yeah.
Oh yeah, so listeners, this game has a lot of side quests, and a lot of them are great. In fact, one of my favorite ones early on was there's an old sailor tells you about the abandoned pirate ship he left behind in the lake because it became the lair of a giant squid, and you can break into the ship and defeat the squid in the hold. It eventually gets you a fairy bottle, which is a pretty good reward because I mean anyone that's played two Zelda games knows that bottles are crucial.
Yeah, definitely.
But Tin, was there something in the first half of the game that you remember specifically just really connecting to?
Is the Zora's part still part of the first half?
Yes, and it's what I was going to talk about, so let's do it.
Okay, so I really like how the Zoras, like the story in how both um leaders of both areas for the Sea Zora and the River Zora are arguing over who's the better performer, who's the better singer, and they could have just like figured this out on their own, but all they needed was Zelda to come around and made them realize what they should be doing instead of being like acting like immature leaders. So it was really funny, and I among all of the places that I went to as well, I think that's the one that stuck with me the most because it was very very silly.
Oh no, it stuck with me too. It was probably my favorite part of the first half of the game. Basically, Lord Jabu Jabu, the giant fish that's worshipped by both Zora tribes, has gone berserk. Zelda and Tribe realize, hey, maybe Jabu Jabu because Jabu Jabu's home was swallowed by a rift. Maybe this is actually an echo evil Jabu Jabu, which ends up being the truth of the matter. But it's two Zora tribes: the River Zora and the I guess they call them Sea Zora or
See.
Ocean Zora.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Sea Zora, and those are the two different designs of Zora. Like the River Zora are the excuse me, the River Zora are sort of the scaly monstrous ones from A Link to the Past, while the Sea Zora are the more sort of mermaid like smooth scale versions from like more like what yeah, you know what like Ruto from Ocarina of Time looks like. And so like they sort of they're making distinctions between the two kinds of Zora, and talking about their squibble. It's not violent or anything. They're just arguing over a musical performance. But then when I think Drad is the chieftain of the River Zora and Kushara is the queen of the Z Zora, by having them sort of see each other's strengths and understand each other better, they're able to harmonize and perform a rather pretty little song together, which opens up the gate to sort of Jabu Jabu's temple that lets you go and take care of this dungeon in the game, which is either the second or third one, depending on whether you do it first or the Gerudo dungeon first. It was lovely, but I want to talk about one other thing about this part of the game. Maybe the echo I use the most for the whole game for puzzle solving is in this area. I think it's when you're first are finding your way to the temple, you unlock the water block.
All right.
Yes. Oh,
And
yeah.
it basically gives you a giant cube of water, and you can even suspend it in midair to like swim through it. And I used the water block until probably the final dungeon of the game. I was water blocking my way through everything. I was making little water bridges to swim through. I would just mash the Y button 4 or 5 times to make a giant water stack to swim to the top of. Once I got the Zora Flippers accessory, I had that the whole game, so I could swim through water blocks faster. Water block all day.
It's such a good one. Yeah.
You can freeze them in the ice dungeon, and they won't work properly in the lava dungeon. I used water blocks so much in this game. So yeah, I guess the Zora dungeon really was a standout section for me.
Yeah. At first, I was always using the trampoline and then the floating tile, and then as soon as the water block was introduced, I bid goodbye to all of those.
I did use the floating tile a lot for a long horizontal gap or something.
Yeah.
And plus, it was fun to me because I mean, those floating tiles are really annoying in some Zelda games like Link's Awakening, where they're basically enemies that attack you. But now you can summon one and ride it like a hoverboard. That's fun the first time you take care of it, but now the water block was too useful to ignore. I just did that thing all the time.
I just one small last thing on the Zora is like, I know you already covered like the differences, but I thought that was just such a creative solution because prior to Ocarina of Time, the Zoras were the more like, fishy fin, look of the River Zora. And then they just changed them. They're like, you know what? Let's make the Zoras hot now.
Except
and it was
the
never
king,
talked about.
Except the king in Ocarina of Time is still the weird fishy looking River Zora.
Okay.
There was sort of and even in Ocarina of Time they'll like when you talk to the friendly Zora they'll be like, oh, we're different from those monster Zora out in the wild. It's there had always been sort of a weird Zora differentiation. But in this game, they make it very clear. Oh, there's 2 tribes of them. Neither of them are good. Neither of them are bad. They just don't always get along. And that was just I don't know. It seemed like a very diplomatic solution to that lore question.
Yeah. Also, maybe my like as far as cuteness, I think both of them like transition to this style very well. They're so adorable.
We should talk about the art style a little bit because this is Grezzo. It's the same studio that developed the 2019 Link's Awakening remake. And I think I used a comparison to dolls or dioramas earlier this episode, and I think it holds up. It's like they all have sort of very cartoony bodies, but very expressive eyes and faces, but very very simple round lines, so that everything looks very very cute, and again, kind of like you're playing with dolls. But because 2D Zelda has always had these sort of super deformed sprites, if you want to call it the Toon Link look, I guess you can. While Zelda from Ocarina of Time onward had sort of more humanistic proportions, Like I think sort of keeping to the 2D Zelda style, keeping sort of not quite tile based movement, but like 3D visuals, but in a 2D plane of action for the most part. I think this art style really works, and they even go back to the Link's Awakening thing of occasionally giving you 2D scrolling style dungeons. Like they have you like they briefly turn the game into a platformer that's side to side and not overhead.
All right.
But they also make that much easier by giving you a regular jump button, which is maybe I think that's a first for 2D Zelda, because
Yeah.
in the older games it was always attached to like the Rock's Cape item or something, or Rock's Feather. So yeah, Zelda can jump, which makes her already way more athletic than Link ever was. But going moving the plot forward a little bit, you rescue if my memory serves, you rescue Minister Left in the Gerudo dungeon and General Right in the Zora dungeon. I might have those flipped. It's not important. They sort of help you get back into Hyrule Town and take on dungeon number 4 of this game, Hyrule Castle, which is a really fun layered dungeon that ends up with you rescuing your dad. You also I think it's at the end of the Southern Ruins. You end up fighting a dark clone of Link, which is again sort of Dark Link from the Water Temple of Ocarina of Time, but now getting a much bigger story role. And so you end up fighting evil Link a couple times in this game, and it's always a pretty intense fight. But this sort of mid game dungeon represents another turning point. After you save King Hyrule, uh, you have full access to the town. You get a clothing change. You, instead of wearing this cloak and a hood, you're in sort of a traditional Zelda gown that they call the Priestess of Wisdom clothes. And more of the map is open up to you because now the guards aren't looking for you, trying to execute you, I guess. and in the second half of the game, they basically give you the locations of the next 3 dungeons, and you can approach them in any order you want. And this is sort of, I think, like the real bones of the second half of Echoes of Wisdom. Just a lot of player freedom, do stuff in any order you want. It's really good. But before we go into that, one thing I wanted to talk about. We mentioned how that this game has a really unique approach to problem solving, or I should say puzzle solving, by giving you multiple ways of approaching anything. Maybe you're limited a little bit, like oh, I don't know, you have to find a way to stun this boss and then hit him with the transformed into Link mode. But the way you have, there's a bunch of ways of stunning him, so you can approach the boss fight in a lot of ways you want. Like there'll be questions like that you identify, but for the most part, this game is really good about like if you explore the area around where the dungeon is, or if you go to this one optional room and defeat this and a certain enemy, they'll give you echoes or present to you echoes that are extremely helpful for the next task. Like it's not an accident that you fight fire and ice keys back to back in the caves leading up to Mount Lanayru, which is sort of one of the second half dungeons, basically the ice dungeon, and then you need sort of fire and ice attack. You need to be able to switch between fire and ice attacks for the boss of that dungeon. So they like, even though there's a lot of ways to solve any problem, they give you they give you breadcrumbs. They're like, hey, this thing that's on the way to this dungeon will be really helpful in that dungeon. They give you they gently nudge you into new echoes and new solutions that will be very helpful soon. And I found that sometimes I notice that happening. I'll be like, they're giving me they give me the fire whiz robe here. I bet this will be helpful. But like sometimes I was completely fooled into thinking I had solved everything on myself by myself and I was a genius. But it was like, no. They really had sort of gently led me in that direction. But it just, to me, that like when I see that sort of thing happening and realize what's happening, that just is good game design to me. This game is so smartly designed in how much freedom they give you with echoes, but also how they sort of manipulate you into using echoes in certain ways. It's great.
Actually, with games like this and like in Tears of the Kingdom, it makes me wonder how many times they beta tested those levels. Like, how many times did they let their like the developers themselves try to play the game with all the items that they can do, and like it's a really, it blows my mind every that players have the freedom to do all of that, and they manage to do that, because usually most games are like, there's like always a certain solution in every area you would do, but this one is just, it's like they're breaking the law with that kind of logic. So
Yeah. In older Zelda games, there was one solution or a sort of a main solution to every
mhm,
single encounter, whether it was a puzzle or an enemy. But in this game, they have to take these into account. Like, what if they get to the boss without finding this echo? What if they got through this entire dungeon without these two echoes? And they have to,
exactly.
like, I mean, it's a lot of beta testing, a lot of puzzle planning, probably just a huge amount of work and testing and basically a level of design of designing that I am incapable of. That it's really impressive when it comes together and you think about how much work must have gone into it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. Like when you give people that much freedom. I mean, we keep talking about freedom in terms of like puzzles and encounters, but also like, actually, I like bringing this up since we're talking at the midpoint anyway. But like getting around the world, like outside of the mountain, because I don't think you can go on there until you get the quest. You can go anywhere on the map if you have the ability. If Tri's leveled up enough and you have the echoes, you can climb over trees. You can technically go anywhere you want. And like to plan for that, just like has to be like so difficult. I don't know that anyone's as entertained or interested in this little fact as me, but I have this thing when I'm playing a game. If I know a big sequence is coming up, like the Hyrule Castle one, I'm like, I'm going to go look around a bit first. And I took the time to go to the volcano and to go down and talk to the scrubs, even though there was nothing to do there yet. And all of the NPCs have dialogue that you won't see later. After the castle and everything changes, you won't see it, but they all have dialogue. There's nothing to do, there's no quest, but they're like, oh wow, it's life is really great here, we have no problems, and I hope that never changes. And I'm like, I was so glad I took the time to go explore, because I would have never known that they did that, and they had to come up with all of this stuff. It's like, well, if someone gets here, we need these people to be able to do something and say something unique. So I just think that was really cool.
We
No,
live
I did.
peaceful lives here with no spiderweb cotton candy with narcotic properties anywhere to be found.
That was funny. Yeah.
Yeah, like if we thought that it was surprising that a Zelda game introduced executions as part of the lore, how about introducing drug problems as part of the
Addiction,
lore?
yeah.
Uh, we can go into it a little bit now. Like those three dungeons in sort of the midpoint or second half of the game are Elden Volcano, which is the fire one, Mount Lanayru, which is the ice one, and then what do you want to call this? Not like the sweet center or whatever they call it, but it's basically
Scrub.
basically the Deku Scrub jungle dungeon, which has some light and electricity darkness properties, but also a lot of a lot of spiders and spider webs. But you sort of have to solve the local problem before getting into the dungeon for basically all of the five big dungeons in the game. Those three plus the Gerudo one and the Zora one. You have to like solve the local problem, figure out what's going on. That gives you access to a rift. You go through the rift and then get into the dungeon properly. Like that's how all five of those mini arcs work. But the Deku one is so crazy. They're all addicted to cotton candy. But then talking around a little bit, you realize, oh, this is a cotton candy made of spider webs. And the spider webs are coming from some kind of rift shadow spider, because they keep calling the rifts thorns, and how
Yeah.
the good spider
Yep.
webs come from the thorns. So like this is from some kind of rift shadow spider that is making the Dekus addicted to spider web cotton candy, and they're so blinded by it, like they even capture Zelda, and you have to do a second arc of escaping jail to because these Dekus are just so passionate about their spiderweb cotton candy. And there's even a point where like Three of them are swallowed by rifts, possibly never to be seen
Oh
again.
yeah.
And there's two guards, and one of them says, "We need to help her rescue our friends. What should we do?" And the other one just pauses and like it's thinking, like, do I save my friends or do I get more cotton candy? It was kind of like that famous Jack Benny joke on the radio where his character is like kind of a Scrooge McDuck miser, and there's a famous sketch where he gets there's a radio this is radio humor from the 1950s or something. I apologize. Where he's getting mugged and goes, "Hey, your money or your life," and then he pauses for an entire 30 seconds on the radio thinking about whether he wants to give up his money or his life.
Nice.
Sorry.
Actually,
So
yeah,
sometimes Zelda games remind me of old radio.
now that I think about it, it seemed like they were high because, like, even when you get out of that jail, and by the time you get your items back, they just hand it to you.
Yeah, they even like they're so mad at you and throw you in jail. But when you confront one of them
Yeah.
that's eating cotton candy on your tri rod, on like the
Yeah,
artifact of the
yeah.
game, he's like, okay, well, you could give me the stick for cotton candy instead of the tri rod. Okay, that's fine. You can go. Like no, they really are really is a cartoonish portrayal of addicts.
Yeah.
It's I mean, it's funny because it's Deku scrubs and spider webs, but it's like, oh, this is a real problem. We need to, if we can solve this by defeating a shadow spider in at the end of the dungeon, we need to do that. But and it ends up being a Goma, which I was, some in Zelda games sometimes is more crab-like, sometimes more spider-like. I think Goma's been very spidery the last few decades. Uh, and the boss fight's actually pretty is pretty wild, and like it makes spider webs on the ground that you have to burn to if you want your mobility back. You have to use echoes with electric properties to hit the jewels on its legs to get it into a
Mhm.
stun state where you can properly attack it. I used a thunder whiz robe and electric keys,
Yeah,
but
same here.
I can only really summon one at a time because it was the first dungeon I did of the three. But like they give you, and the dungeon itself is really good. You have to there's a lot of dark areas, and so you have to set webs on fire or light things with light crystals with electricity to see your way across. um and there's a lot of the underwater segments in this game that are in a 2D plane are kind of like that too. You have to like find bulbs or anglerfish to light your way to get to the next air bubble so you don't drown. There's just so many segments in these games where like it's a themed area or a theme puzzle, but when you're in the middle of it, it just feels really good. And this is probably my favorite part of the game, these three mid-game dungeons, because the challenge level is increased a little bit from the first four,
Mhm.
and it's exploration of Zelda puzzle mechanics and combat mechanics that I found quite exciting. Like, I mean, I described that Goma boss fight in light detail. Is there a moment, whether it's a puzzle or a boss or something similar from these second half dungeons that really stood out to you?
Oh, for me, I think it's also I also went to the scrub, the Deku scrub first. So this was actually the one that I remember the most as well because I don't know if you guys would agree, but w- the Deku scrub dungeon felt the longest to me. But
Yeah, I think so.
I
yeah,
I remember thinking that the volcano one was shorter than the other two.
yeah, yeah,
But
yeah, I would
these
agree.
were longer and more involved dungeons than the first couple for sure.
Yeah, and there was also a specific part in that dungeon where I couldn't figure out how to go through. Like there were some of these statues. I didn't know that you had to drop things on the floor or the switch at the same time.
That's right.
Oh
Oh
Like,
my
yeah.
god.
Mhm.
well, you have to, yeah. Maybe there's other ways to do it, but I would always summon one of those armor statues, or what are they called?
Armos, yes,
Yeah, I
me
would
too.
summon an Armos, and they would walk back and forth in a pattern, and
Mhm.
I would put them over one of the switches, and right when they walked over one, I would try to jump on the other one myself. But yeah, like I think I solved one of those kind of accidentally when I was just screwing around trying to figure out what to do, and then for the rest of them, I'm like, oh, you need to press them simultaneously, and then I sort of
Yeah,
figured out
yeah.
the Armos thing. But you have to think outside the box a little bit. It's
Mhm.
because it's not a one item, one solution puzzle. Sometimes they're a little difficult. I had to look up how to take care of some of the puzzles in Mount Lanayru and the gimmick around that one is you
Oh,
can
uh-huh.
you can throw red rocks. If you throw a red rock into a pedestal, then it'll heat up the room it's connected to. And if you throw a blue rock into the same pedestal,
Oh, those.
it'll freeze the
Mhm.
room that it's connected to. And towards the end, there you have to do a pattern of like heating up a room, then walking through the ice wall that's melted and getting some items, and then refreezing it so
Mhm.
you can manipulate the ice wall in a different way. I had to look online because I for one of those rooms, because just the pattern of freezing and unfreezing was not clear to me at first. But it's like these are good semi-complex Zelda dungeons
Mhm.
that where and if you ever look up the answer, it seems obvious in retrospect. But you really do feel like $1,000,000 when you really solve an encounter or do really well, and that's the feeling that you're always chasing with the Zelda game, or at least me personally. But
Yeah.
Mike, was there a second half dungeon or moment that really stood out to you?
I did really like Mount Lanayru. I did that one first, which I think is the hardest of the three, because I remember, my thing was like, again, I already checked out the other areas, and this is the one area I couldn't see, so I'm just like, I need to explore. So I'm like, I'll do that one first, and like getting to it, like climbing the mountain with all the like getting frozen, and then the some of the puzzles in the dungeon. I'm like, oh, there is a difficulty change here with these other dungeons. I mean, again, maybe because I did that one first. I think that one is the hardest.
Yeah, I did Deku, then I did Deku Jungle, then Ice Mountain, then Volcano, and I think the Ice Mountain probably was the hardest of the three.
Yeah, yeah. I did the ice the last.
Okay, probably
And
probably smart.
yeah, maybe you had the way they were trying to funnel us to do it, Tin, because it's probably easy to do the volcano first because it's just that starting town to the west of Hyrule, like it backs up into a mountain path right up the volcano. It's not that hard to find any of these three dungeons
Yeah.
because like once you sort of find the entrance, they sort of path you to it, but it those paths are, I think, meaningfully more difficult than the first half areas for sure. And if I had to pick a hardest one, it probably is Mount Lanayru. But I thought that the challenge level and sort of puzzles within were pretty good for all three of them. Like these stand out to me as good Zelda dungeons.
Yeah, I actually do feel. I thought of this a lot going through the other two dungeons, because when you do Mount Lanayru, one of the echoes you can get on the mountain is the cloud, which I think is, outside of the fact that it disappears, maybe the most overpowered version. Like, it's a bed that doesn't require ground under it. So doing that area first and getting the cloud, there were a couple puzzles like in the jungle, especially, where I'm like, I know what I'm supposed to do in this room, but I can just make clouds and climb over this pit.
I never found a cloud.
Oh, really?
I did not. I this is news to me. I remember clouds being in the path to to the Mount Lanayru temple,
Yeah.
but I never got an I guess I never defeated one and got an echo
I
because
w-
that they
it might be one of the small rifts, but you probably did all those.
I don't know. I mean, I was struggling to get through that because again, like you have to do the Monster Hunter thing of drink a warming potion to get. Oh, I know it's a Breath of the Wild thing, but to me, it's a
Yeah.
Monster Hunter
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
because I was doing those on the P. I was crafting hot drinks to get through the icy mountain on the PSP in 2009.
Yeah.
But the like getting through that mountain path was a minor struggle because of the additional mechanics. So I think I did sort of beeline to the Yeti's house and sort of take care of things and didn't re-explore much afterwards. I did get the Ice Wiz robe, but I don't remember getting or maybe I did get the Cloud Echo but didn't try sleeping on it. I'm not sure. This is well, now I want to revisit it. So thanks for that, Mike.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, it's just you can't sleep on it, but it's just a ledge.
Oh, okay, but it's like a free ledge, so it's something that I could have maybe used instead of horizontal water blocks,
Right. Right.
which I used a lot.
I didn't use as many like cold ward potions as I should have, because I kept running out. So I ended up just carrying like a fire Zol around to keep myself warm, which is good
Oh.
unless you're like in combat. But if you just hold him over you, you stay warm.
Oh, I went
Oh,
completely
smart.
bananas making smoothies in this game.
I'm sure.
Oh,
I
same here.
Yeah, I like the two accessories I always had on me were the Zora flippers because they did so much swimming through water blocks, and the enemies drop more crafting materials accessory because I was making salty milk smoothies all the time because the salty milk ones are good because the fresh milk and the rock salt are easy to find, and I think it
Mm-hmm.
heals you like half of an energy bar and 10 hearts.
Mm-hmm.
So I had carried a bunch of those, and before I went on the volcano and I knew I was doing a volcano dungeon, I just made a bunch of chill cactus smoothies. So I knew I'd be able to walk on the lava a little bit. I don't know if there's an accessory for walking on the hot floors. I didn't find one, but and like we talked a little bit about side quests in this game. There are so many side quests that are usually give you a lot of them to do after you like solve the problem of a region. Like after you beat the Zora dungeon, there's a bunch of Zora side quests you can do, and that sort of repeats for different areas of the game. And the side quest dungeons, excuse me, the side quest rewards get really good, and they'll give you things like accessories or fairy bottles or huge amounts of rupees that you can pay the ridiculous gal fairy to let you wear more accessories. Um, and she gives you I think one of the last side quests that you get is the great fairy that gives you accessory slots. She gives you an accessory that shows you on the map where like every single energy piece is. If you want to, if you're looking for those to upgrade your Link sword and Link bow, it's basic. And we're talking about things that we've barely scratched the surface of this episode, like side quests and those and the upgrades to the Link mode stuff. They give you surprising depth everywhere. I didn't even find Dampe for his like automaton research and his run of side quests until I was almost done with the game.
Same here. Yeah.
Yeah, same
And
here.
so there's like, even though this game does not have a huge map to explore, you could probably walk from, if you have if you have enough story unlocked that you can explore all of it, you can probably go from one corner of it to the other on foot in like 5 minutes. But it's very dense with things to do, and if you revisit areas or like basically it's a smaller map for a Zelda game, but it's very dense and full of things. It reminds me of like Minish Cap in that way. uh but because there's so many, there's always more echoes to find. A lot of optional areas will have sort of a mid boss of a really really strong echo that will end up being like a 5 slot. Like I that's how I got like the Sword Moblin level 3 and the Lizalfos level 3 were from side quests of out of the way areas that will really help in boss fights like this. uh, there's so much freedom in this game and so many discoverable things in this game that I think my playthrough was around 25 hours, but there was a bunch of stuff I didn't get to. And I mean, we're recording this a little bit before Dragon Quest 3 comes out in mid-November. And I'm thinking about maybe going back to this one and cranking out some more side quests before I have to rededicate my life to Dragon Quest, because a new Dragon Quest will really get me to drop everything else. But yeah, the surprising depth for this game that does not have a gigantic play space.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the accessories and other rewards because I think that is really cool. It's so often you think about rewards in older Zelda games, and it's like, okay, well, I'm probably going to get a heart piece or a bunch of money or something from this, but this one kept surprising me with like just creative new accessories and outfits and things I was not expecting.
Yeah, like you mentioned pajamas earlier, and I never found those, but I did find the cat suit from a quest that a cat in the village gives you. And if you equip the cat suit, which there's no penalty to, I think you can talk to every cat in the game,
It's so
and
cool.
Yeah.
and they mostly talk about sleeping or fish or something. And there's one whose owner is terrified of bugs. So, there's, and I think she gives you a side quest to defeat a bunch of bugs in a cave nearby. But the two cats, if you talk to them in the cat soon, one of them will goes, Master got mad at me when I gave her a present, and the other one's like, you moron, she's terrified of bugs, and you keep dropping bugs on her pillow. It's like the but like you don't have to do the cat talking side quest, and but if you do, you can. There's the game has dozens of cats that have little funny commentary. Includes Zelda's own cat in her room that you can visit and talk to. There's so many like little optional things that give this game surprising depth. Did you guys do the imposter mystery side quests in Hyrule Castletown?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah.
Like,
You're gonna
I
have
really did
to
think I
check
was
every guard.
yeah, I really did think I was playing like a game of werewolf or something, like having to talk to every guard and find out which one had the inconsistency in their story to figure out which one was the imposter. But really it was just a villager that wanted to be a guard but couldn't enlist. And so it had a happy ending instead of a one of them was secretly a monster ending. But like just little things like that like give this game just I don't know. I was constantly surprised by the things this game gave me or things that it let me do. And as a result, we haven't talked about the end game yet, but I don't know if this one is necessarily a new favorite, but Echoes of Wisdom immediately is like, oh, this is capital G good Zelda and not a Zelda I kind of want to forget about like Spirit Tracks. Like this is like maybe this game will never be as prominent as a big tentpole 3D one like Tears of the Kingdom, but I'm gonna fondly remember this game. It was I mean, we've been talking about it positively the whole time. Like, Mike, does this enter your canon of good Zelda?
Oh, for sure. I mean, I'd have to stop and think about things I didn't like. Like, I guess some people don't like the inconsistent frame rate. I don't care. I think I'm in the minority there. I just don't. I had fun with the game. Like the only thing I think that didn't land for me is actually that side quest with Dompe and the little like robots you can make, because I don't really understand them. They're like echoes, except they can break down. So I'm like, it's fine. Like you don't need to do it. Otherwise, nothing. Like I had a lot of fun with it. Every little thing I would find was like just a new. It just delightful all around. So I was really happy. And the last. I'm sure we'll talk about the last sequence a bit more too, but I thought it was really a really creative way of like finishing up the game.
Yeah, I would also agree on the invention thingy, since I also unlocked it later part in the game. I feel like I mostly did all of the side quests and even unlocking all the smoothies. But the one that I really didn't bother to do is the inventions, because most echoes monsters that you get along the way are already overpowered. So it didn't make sense for me to um still use the inventions um uh that you would get from this character. But I do appreciate that uh they make you think over on how you're gonna get that specific invention. Like they
Yes.
would have like um riddles. He would give some riddles for you to solve, and you're gonna have to bring him that specific item or that specific echo or monster for him to get combine them together. So I do like that part. I just don't like the reward, I guess.
Yeah. I mean,
I mean,
maybe. Oh, sorry.
no, you go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, maybe it's just the fact that we didn't get it till late in the game. Like, maybe if we
Maybe.
stumbled across it earlier on, it might be more useful. So,
True.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's in like the sort of middle upper right of the
Yeah.
map. So like I think you're intended to find it on the way to Mount Lanayru, or maybe
Hmm.
going between like the Zora village and and the volcano or something. But I didn't really stumble across it until late. And the problem with his side quest is one I had with a lot of others is several of them ask you for a specific echo, and because it was just a pain in the ass to scroll through the echoes, like I just dropped a couple of them. Like there's one lady that wants you to find fish to scare her son into learning to be
Oh
a better
yeah.
swimmer, and one thing she asks you is for a sinister fish. And I threw sharks and anglerfish and piranhas in there, and I just could not find the exact right sinister fish. She got scared of the fish I was dropping in front of her instead of like telling me, oh, that's the one I'm looking for. So like just so like just sort of I don't know, like I don't think any of the puzzle solutions in this game are too obtuse, but sometimes I was just more content to move on with the story than go through every side quest when it wasn't immediately clear to me what I had to do. But I mean, sometimes I'm very objective driven when it comes to games like these. Like I got a little bit. I still haven't finished Tears of the Kingdom because I just got a little overwhelmed at the beginning, and I'm like, man, get me back to Final Fantasy 16 where at least I know where I'm supposed to go. but this game really does balance the total freedom and huge verb selection of a game like Tears of the Kingdom with a more structured Zelda environment, because like we've basically been talking about this game in terms of seven sort of main plot point dungeons, and you know, like Zelda dungeons aren't all exactly like they were in A Link to the Past nowadays, where you know you explore the first half, fight a mid boss, find a key item, and then use that key item to reinterpret the dungeon and then fight a new boss. Like it's not Zelda dungeons aren't always the same like that, and this game does have mid bosses and bosses, but no sort of crucial signature item that gets you through every dungeon. But like these are still very cool versions of Zelda dungeons and boss encounters. Um, my favorite part of the second half was one we've touched on only a little bit, I think, and that's like the I was sort of the ending of the Lineru dungeon. But and how it's well, how do I put this? Like when you're going to Mount Lineru, you meet a very silly Yeti named Conde. And Conde is very funny. He thinks that that the way to stop the rifts is to shovel snow into them until they're full,
Yeah.
even though they're like dark voids to nowhere. And also his dad's passed away, and his brother that took care of him went off on a journey. So he's waiting for his brother and is trying to be a good Yeti in his absence, which is a little bit sad and lonely when you see it. But then when you save the rift and solve the dungeon, he's really appreciative, and it's just he's a friendly Yeti that just is maybe doesn't understand very well, but like the boss of that area is a sort of shadow Yeti wearing a like that wields fire and ice magic. At first I was wondering, it's like, oh no, is this his brother that's been corrupted by the rift, or is it like the ghost of his father, or like what's going on? And I don't think it's either of them. I think it's just a shadow Yeti, because the ending of the game is Conde welcoming his brother back from a hot air balloon. So it's like, I don't know, like this game gives you this freedom, and but within a specific structure, and the writing in it is very very sweet and cute. Like it's even like the Goron that's struggling with being the new chieftain, or the Gerudo princess that's trying to assert her authority, and sort of go against what her mom and the ministers are recommending, or the two different tribes of Zora coming together to make a concert. These are just so wholesome. I even when there's dark undertones, like Zelda being up for execution, or the Deku Scrubs addicted to spider webs. Like the writing around all of this is is compelling, and just weirdly Zelda cute in a way that I found very satisfying. It's hard for me to explain this, but I think this game like is obviously a little bit more experimental and weird than a big Zelda game, but it's having so much fun with all the risks it's taking and all the writing it's doing. This is a sometimes dark, sometimes lighthearted Zelda game that really works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh, uh, I maybe a huge chunk of the cuteness is also because of the art style, that even I was not scared of Big Ganon at all. I think he looks adorable.
Yeah, the art style sort of aids the odd cuteness of this game.
I think the cuteness like also throws me off sometimes because of the things we've mentioned, that the spider webs and all that. But like also speaking of Conde, that thing where he's telling us like, oh yeah, my dad's here and my brother's doing this, and then just that moment where you go outside and it's like, oh, anyway, this is my dad, and it's his like grave. I was like, wow, I wasn't ready for that.
Yeah, like Conde almost seems like a silly comedy character, but then you realize, oh no, this poor Yeti is profoundly lonely. We got to help him. it's This game made some very very odd tonal choices, but I was really having a great time throughout. But let's move on to the end game. I mean, we've mentioned Ganon a couple times. um Ganon is not the principal villain of this game. I think the only time you really encounter Ganon is in that first dungeon when you're fighting a shadow of him. But Ganondorf is not a character in this world. Ganon himself is not really a character. They just use images of him. um and we know from multiple Zelda games that the creation myth of Zelda is three goddesses, Din, Nehru, and Farore, created the world, and the Triforce, which is sort of a an object that represents ultimate power, courage, and wisdom, that sort of anchors the entire world in light. And usually Ganon, but different villains try to obtain the Triforce to either end the world or remake it in their image, kind of deal. So like there's three goddesses in a Triforce. Usually, there's always a Triforce, and usually three goddesses. And in the second half of the game, to sort of find a path to the Triforce, you need to do those three dungeons to gain the favor of each of the three goddesses. And every time you gain a goddess favor, they give you a little goddess symbol. That's one of the three symbols from Oracle of Ages, which I found very appealing, because I really like the two Oracle games.
Yeah.
But basically, they go to an unaddressed part of Zelda lore. What was there in the darkness before they created the world? And evidently there was just an empty void, occupied by a being named Null. And when the goddesses created the world in the Triforce, Null found this incursion of light into his void horrible. So Null has been trying to destroy Hyrule from his void, and through sort of darkness and rifts, possibly forever. But the three goddesses created these beings called Tries, that sort of are the barrier of light that holds back the darkness. And sort of with this additional context, we realize, all right, so these rifts started appearing because Null was able to breach part of the barrier, and then this one sort of main story Try is helping Zelda repair the rifts to sort of hold back Null's influence. But after you get the third goddess favor, Null sort of makes a new push into the world, briefly knocks out Zelda, and makes a shadow Zelda echo. And the final dungeon or final sort of the final story sequence is tracking down this Zelda echo through the Eternal Woods, solving a small puzzle in the woods to open the door to the temple to the Triforce. And when Null, or Shadow Zelda / Null, tries to take the Triforce, because again his goal is to destroy the world, so he'll have his peaceful empty void again. When he tries to take the Triforce, it's split into three, and the Triforce of Power goes into Null, the Triforce of Wisdom goes into Zelda, and the Triforce of Courage disappears into the void. And Null's like, oh, I bet it went back to that hero guy again. And so you go through a new still area. There's a lot of rift puzzles are called still blank, like like I don't know, still Hyrule Field, still Eastern Elden Volcano, that kind of thing. So you go through a new still segment, have a pretty cool boss fight against Shadow Zelda, where I was doing a lot of summoning birds and Wizrobes to defeat her shadow summons. It's kind of like a Zelda versus Zelda fight. That's sort of a fun inverse of the Shadow Link fights you've done multiple times over the game. And after you defeat Shadow Zelda, you finally free Link. And the last dungeon of the game, which is not very long, I think it took me less than 30 minutes until the boss fight, at least, is sort of you teaming up with Link, but you don't control Link. He just fights around you with his bow and sword, while you sort of support him with summons. And I found this so fun. It was kind of like the when I played Kingdom Hearts 2 for the first time a month or so ago, and they give you Riku for just the final area of the game. And the Sora Riku team up is so powerful that it's just you're just wrecking everything, and it's very fun and satisfying. Like getting Link as sort of your bonus ally for this dungeon is so fun, and you solve puzzles by like creating platforms for Link to jump up to reach a switch, or like Link and Zelda are separated, and Zelda has to use her echoes to hit a switch to let Link continue forward. Like there's a couple of small puzzles like that are fun. They kind of remind me of the Thief Girl in the Link Between Worlds getting through
Yeah.
getting through that thieves hideout dungeon, because you basically are solving puzzles in parallel with an NPC, but in a way that's overall pretty fun. Um, but so you do a couple of these segments and then have the final battle against Null, where he twists himself into it looks like a purple and black version of Try, the little
Yeah.
sprite that you're, because it has sort of runes and small eyes on the surface of his sphere like body that are kind of like Try and his friends, but with sort of twisted claw arms sticking out of it. And you basically just throw as much offense as you can at this thing. You'll have the claws appearing out of the walls and ground to try and drag you. Um, Link is constantly attacking it, but if he gets hit too many times, he'll be stunned, and that leaves Zelda vulnerable to harm. And basically, you just need to throw your best offensive echoes at it as much as you can. I had a lot of white wolfos going at it, a lot of what was that thing called? A lot of pea hats trying to slash it up as much as I could. Because at this point in the game, I could summon 3 pea hats at once, which is basically 3 like spinning blades of doom. But they died in one hit, so I couldn't use them all the time. It's the final boss is much more involved than the dungeon leading up to it, and I thought was pretty satisfying. Did you have a favorite echo or two? I mean, for me, it was White Wolfos mostly, but did you have a favorite echo or two that you used in the final encounter?
The Wiz.
You
Oh, the one of the elemental whiz robes.
Yeah.
you guys in your whiz robes. I
Those whiz robes are good. They cost a lot of slots, so you can only
Yeah.
have one up at a time. I think I only got my meter to level try to level 10, so maybe I didn't get everything. But the whiz robes are good, man, especially if there's something very mobile.
I guess I should have used them more on bosses. Like I would try using them sometimes, and like they are just way too slow for like a lot of the average enemies in the game. So I should have used them more during bosses. I like them, but okay. So were there others for you, Tin, besides the Wizrobe?
Oh, I didn't really have my most used summons were always the Wiz, but as for the others, I just try to figure out which one was like more effective based on how this boss moves. So I would flip things every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
I used whiz robes a lot for elemental enemies that were immune to regular attacks, but I also used Gways a lot. They're sort of these little purple crows, but
Oh yeah.
I could summon 2 or 3 at once, and they would dive bomb at enemies quickly. So I would like in regular encounters, I would use Gways a lot, but most of the time it was I mean, pea hats are really good against small weak enemies because they're just spinning blades. They're giant plant spinning blades. I would use fire and ice keys against the opposite element sometimes. And I liked the thunder Wizrobe because he could basically those thunder projectiles would go through anything and then stun enemies a lot, and I could switch to Link mode and kill them that way. But the Wizrobes, their rate of attack is a little slow, so I only relied on them for certain scenarios. But for the final encounter, I used White Wolfos a lot, which is basically a white wolf that summons 2 smaller gray wolves, and
Oh
then
yeah, they're fast.
they'll attack very quickly, so they would get a lot of hits in at once.
Yeah, that wolf is really powerful.
And I think it's unmissable because it's the mid boss of the Lanayru Temple dungeon.
Right.
So it's not like level 3 Armos or level 3 Lizalfos, because those were in optional areas.
Yeah. I maybe I should have mixed it up a little bit more, but I did the last boss the way I started doing a lot of things later on, and instead of Wizrobes or anything like that, I summoned albatrosses. I forget what they're
Oh
actually
wow.
called. The white bird. I'm
Yeah,
like,
the white sea.
they only cost one at the end, so I'm like,
Okay.
I just would like throw 6 of
Just
them
spam
out,
them.
just constantly spam them, just to have
I
something
think
airborne.
I think Gways are like Albatross, but a little bit stronger and more aggressive.
Yeah.
Because again, they're purple, but they also cost 2 summon points, so I can only have 3 out at once.
Yeah. So it was just like with 6 of them, something is going to get through. So it was a combination of the albatross birds and the level 2 dark nut if I wanted something on the ground,
Oh
because
right,
they
the
can
Dark
dark
Nut,
nut.
yeah.
they can take a couple hits.
I said level 3 Armos. I think I meant level 3 Dark Nut, because the level 3 one, it costs like 5 points, but he'll kill anything with his big
Yeah.
spinning axe.
He's
Yeah.
huge.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he takes up like the space of 3 regular Dark Nuts.
Oh
I
wait,
never found
can
a level
I?
3 Spear Moblin, but I did find level 3 Sword Moblin. He was in the forest at the end.
I don't know that there is. I don't think they all
Ma-
have threes, or do they?
I for sure found level 3 Dark Nut, Lizalfos, and Sword Moblin for
Yeah, I
sure.
have those.
And I use those 3 occasionally. But yeah, like this game gives you a lot of freedom and a lot of fun. But when you defeat Null and he retreats, and Try can go back to their job of holding back the darkness, you get a rather tragic moment, because like a frowning Zelda has to say goodbye, and Try's like, wait, I don't understand. I mean, I'm leaving. I'm doing my job. We saved the day, but now I'm sad because we won't be together anymore. And it's like
That's
this. It was another surprising moment of cute wholesomeness that I was really not expecting at this point in the game.
Yeah.
that sequence nearly made me cry.
Aw.
Yeah, it was such a very touching moment. Like, I wasn't ready to say goodbye to Try. Like, it made me feel that I, I would want a Zelda game again, because I want to see Try again.
I mean, the final scene after the credits is going to Zelda's room, where her cat's sleeping on Zelda's
Yeah.
bed, but then it sort of zooms over to the Tri-Rod framed in the wall there. So it's like we don't know if we'll get another one of these games, but Try is very present and will be remembered now. It's and at least Try didn't die at the end. If Try had sacrificed themselves, I would have been pretty upset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they fortunately they didn't do that. Um, but yeah, like this game is sort of sweet and cute and sometimes weirdly dark, and you get real world threatening stakes once you understand what Null's up to. So even though there's no Ganondorf for Ganon, like I think that this story has real weight to it and was just a really fun Zelda experience from front to back. But we're gonna remember it for everything the Tri-Rod can do, and for the first time being Zelda rescuing Link and not the other way around.
Can I just say something stupid or during my experience?
Please.
um, like, before they even introduced Null, like I thought it was uh, I thought Ganon was like the main villain here, but then like by the time they started talking about Null, I thought Null meant, like, how in some games where they don't say the villain's name, like it's still secret. I thought that's the point of calling it Null. Like,
Oh, you thought that Null was like an epithet for
yeah, for like,
for someone else? Like it was still
yeah, like you
Ganon,
can't,
but he was behind a shadow curtain or something.
yeah,
Right,
like
right.
you can't say that villain's name. Like, you're not allowed to, like in some other games. I thought that's how it was intended, and I thought there would actually be a different name by the end of the game when you fight the final boss, and I was so surprised that it flashed on my screen. It's just Null.
No, it's just an eternal force of darkness and hunger, kind of like the final boss of a Kirby game or something. Which and Kirby might be the absolute king of very cute aesthetics hiding surprising darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was
And
kind of
every
dumbfounded.
Kirby final boss other than Day to Day is like cosmic space horror. That series is wild. We need a Kirby RPG.
Yes, for sure. No, I can see that, Tin. I mean, they obviously go to that well a lot. And, even Skyward Sword is like, technically, in a way, it really is Ganon, sort of, or at least his predecessor. So I'm like, no, they committed to it. They committed to doing a different villain this time. It was cool.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think Ganon or Ganondorf is ever mentioned. And we
Yeah.
get a Ganon shadow boss at the beginning, but other than that, no Ganon at all.
Yeah.
Which is a little too bad, because I was hoping there would be some kind of hidden Ganon to fight, just so we could get a Ganon Echo to summon against the final boss.
Oh, that would be fun. Yeah.
I kind of wanted that. But the final boss did throw shadow Ganons at us a little bit. Like one phase of the final boss is throwing shadow versions of bosses from throughout the game at you, which I thought was a cool move. But just that's just part of the boss fight and not really important to the story.
Yeah.
But
I of course briefly, I think it's like, okay, there's parts of this world that look like A Link to the Past. Uh, I didn't figure this out on my own because I'm not smart enough to figure this out, but I saw online that someone pointed out the where the similarities to A Link to the Past map stop, like they're basically the center of this game's map, and everything outside is where like the Gorons and Zora are. So you can argue it's like, well, if this is that world, why did we never see the Gorons? Like, well, they were outside of where you could explore. So I'm like, I want
oh,
to be like, ooh, where does this fit in the timeline? And then I'm like, okay, the timeline doesn't really matter. It's a fun thing to think about, but I thought that was a really, really, I don't remember where I read that, probably on YouTube, but that was a really good insight.
and I mean, we do know that the A Link to the Past, Link Between Worlds continuity does have sages of wisdom. So maybe like this takes place it like far in the future after A Link Between Worlds, but you're able to explore beyond the mountains, like you indicated.
Oh, it could be, yeah.
Possibly, but where are all the Dekus in Link to the Past? Then it's all right. We're if we're getting into deep Zelda lore and talking about Zelda Skyward Sword, Zelda timeline issues. That sounds like a different podcast episode. So I think we're done for today. But thank you so much, Mike and Tin, for just talking about this game that I was really excited to play and excited to talk about afterwards. Like selfishly, a lot of these podcasts are, you know what? I really want to talk to someone about the specific video game thing. So let's see who I can wrangle from RPG Fan to do it on the podcast. So thank you for indulging me in talking about this genuinely really fun and exciting game.
Yeah, thanks for having
Oh.
us.
Yeah.
And thank
Glad
you,
to be
listeners,
here.
for. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Oh yeah, I was just saying I'm glad to be here.
All right. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on this discussion. But in terms of future discussions on Retro Encounter, we are going to do 2 episodes on the aforementioned The Legend of Zelda, A Link to the Past. We haven't done like a Zelda dedicated set of episodes other than this month since I think 2018. So maybe doing some in-depth Zelda talk on Retro Encounter was a little overdue, but we're making up for it in November of 2024. But in December of 2024, we already have it mapped out. We're going to do a spoiler cast on Metaphor Refantasio, a game I beat within a couple days of finishing Zelda, actually. And Tin, oh boy, if you thought I was fired up for this episode, wait for a couple weeks where we talk about Metaphor, because that might be like one of the signature RPGs of the 2020s. We're not even halfway through the 2020s, and I'm already comfortable saying that.
Well, I can't wait because that game, there's just a lot of things to talk about in that game.
Oh yeah, that we might have to break the 2-hour mark for that episode, but we'll see. That's coming in about 3 weeks. And after our episodes of Metaphor Refantasio, we're doing 2 episodes on Dragon Quest III. Dragon Quest III's HD 2D remaster comes out in mid-November. I think it's out by the time this episode posts, but as we're recording this, that episode's not. That video game is not out yet. So I think a lot of the panelists on that will be playing the remaster, but the whole episode is about that original 1989 Dragon Quest game that is the one that indirectly led to a police request to start releasing Dragon Quest games on weekends in Japan. It's not a Japanese law, like the internet has said many times, but the Japanese National Police did ask Enix to please release them on weekends, so many people don't miss work and school. But so and after Dragon Quest episodes, we are going to do our year-end episode at the end of December, and I think that episode is 449. So I need to start planning big episode 450 pretty soon, because we're alarmingly close to a multiple of 50 on Retro Encounter, and we always do something special on episodes multiple of 50. But if you want to engage with RPG Fan in ways other than listening to Retro Encounter, there's the website itself, rpgfan.com, where we have reviews and news articles and podcasts and stuff going up every day of the week. RPG Fan is also on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, Discord, always called Blue Sky, always called either RPG Fan or RPG Fancom. So you can interact with RPG Fan in many, many different ways. Another great way to interact is to go to rpgfan.com/shop, where you can find 2 storefronts, one hosted by TeePublic, where you can get RPG Fan apparel and accessories, and a second hosted by Hyperplay RPG, which is a UK-based book publisher that among whose wares include a 300-page tome of 1-page RPG Fan reviews from over the years. Mike, I know you put a lot of blood, sweat, tears, heart, soul into that book. And the final product, which I do have sitting on my shelf downstairs, is a really impressive tome. So, listeners, if you don't have your own copy of the RPG Fan Review Collection from Hyperplay RPG, go and get you a copy. You can say something if you want, Mike. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
Yes, please. I'm very proud of it myself, so I'm always happy to hear more people picking it up.
Right on. And also, Retro Encounter is not the only podcast of the RPG Fan Podcast Network. There's also Random Encounter every 2 weeks about randomness and what games we're playing, and Rhythm Encounter every alternating 2 weeks about RPG music. And Mike, you are one of the regular hosts of Rhythm Encounter.
That's true.
I think around the time this episode goes up, we might be posting the Tales of episode that we're planning right now.
Yes. I keep saying on Rhythm Encounter, the next two are they might switch. So the next episode is either a Tales episode or Origins, which is like our first exposure to RPG music. But that's what's coming.
That's exciting.
Next. Yeah.
Right on. So, listeners, please interact with Retro, Random, or Rhythm Encounters on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or however you listen. We love you guys listening, and we love you guys providing feedback, especially if that feedback is a 5-star out of 5 review. But if you want to reach out to us panelists as individuals and not as podcasts or websites, let's tell the listeners how to find us, the panelists, starting with you, Mike.
Best way for me is just email mike@rpgfan.com.
And conveniently, because there are at least 2 mics, I'm Sollosi at rpgfan.com, which I don't usually advertise on these podcasts, but helpfully one of us goes by our last name more than their first name, Mike.
Yes.
We established this at the last Council of Mics in early 2024. I mean, it's I was really sick in the 2023 one, so I'm glad I got to make the meeting this year.
Yeah, I'm glad you made it. It wouldn't have been the same with you missing it again.
Right, and I know. And sorry, Tin, you don't have an invitation to the Council of Mics, but how can listeners find you online?
I can find me in the RPG Fan Discord. I'm literally named Tin there, and you can also send me an email at tin@rpgfan.com.
Thank you. And listeners, if you want to find me online, it's not that hard. I am on Blue Sky, Instagram, and RPG Fans Discord. On all 3 places, I am called @Evoker4Dogs. But you know what? There's so many cats in this game. Was there a single dog, or did the cats live? Is Hyrule a cat-infested, dog-free world in Echoes of Wisdom?
There's a couple dogs.
Okay, there were. I mean,
Yeah.
otherwise I was just noticing a lot of wolves.
No,
So
I mean definitely way more cats. There's a dog on the ranch and like maybe 1 or
Right.
2 others.
got it. So the cats live
I
in the
only
cities.
remember two dogs.
Yeah. The cats live in the cities to protect everyone from dogs and wolves.
Yes.
Understood. Now, living with cats for the first time, I think I understand that all too well now. Listeners, thank you. Good night and good luck.